Today on Call for Two, Greg and I take a deep dive into Terra 2, its two expansions, and the original game. Find out what we think coming up. You're watching Call for Two. I'm Jesse. I'm here with Greg.
Thanks for having me on your channel.
Great to have you back.
So today we're going to have a lengthy discussion, maybe too lengthy, about Terra and its various incarnations.
Terra 2.
And Terra 2, yes, of course. And this is a very long discussion. We're not keeping ourselves in check at all. This is good if you want to hear us meander along about this whole game and gaming system. Or if you've already played the game, it's good to do that. But if you would prefer a quick overview and our quick thoughts, we've got videos on the channel discussing each of these different components here. So those might be better suited. If not, and you do want to listen to this whole thing, well, you can get started by taking a look at the game as we go down to the table.
Terra 2 is a cooperative tile-laying exploration game with a focus on tight optimization of actions. Designed by Tim Pinder and published in 2023 by Inside the Box Board Games, it's a follow-up iteration of 2017's Terra. It's a medium-low complexity game with a simple core rule set but lots of edge case rules. Mechanics include tile laying, variable player powers, and action point efficiency. Technically, it plays from 1 to 6 players, though the 1 and 2 player games involve controlling at least 3 or 4 characters. Playtime is about 80 minutes. Play begins by setting up the starting row of tiles that form the temple entrance and mixing up the entire set of temple tiles to form a draw deck. Players then choose character roles from a generous set of 10 included in the base game. For solo play, you'll control 4 characters. For 2-player games, each player chooses 2 characters to control. Each character has their own colored meeple and player sheet which lists their special abilities and starting health. Some powers make use of special character-specific tokens. Play proceeds in rounds. On each round, players take turns in clockwise order. On each turn, players have 2 action points to spend on various basic actions or their special abilities. Basic actions cost 1 or 2 action points and include revealing new tiles adjacent to your character's location, moving 1 space, revealing and moving in 1 step, running 3 spaces, attacking enemies, picking up, dropping, or handing off items, digging out rubble, or healing yourself or another character on your space. Normally, players have 2 action points per turn, but may exert to gain an additional 3rd action point. Exerting always costs 1 health point, but may trigger an additional health point loss at the end of the turn based on a hazard die roll. Special abilities are described on each character sheet and may range in cost from 0 to 3 action points. At the end of each turn, the current player rolls the hazard die, which can trigger negative effects. These effects include a loss of health if you chose to exert this turn, the triggering of various traps on various tiles, or the addition or movement of enemies. At the end of each round, enemies activate and move towards and attack the nearest characters. Players are never eliminated, but if a character loses all of their health points, they become downed and can perform only a simple crawl action to move 1 space each turn until healed by another character. Revealed tiles contain a variety of restrictive pathways and hazards and traps, including enemy guard spawn points, bridges which restrict travel, lava spike and dart traps which can injure players when triggered, and ruins which can block travel unless dug out. The game takes place in 2 stages. In the first stage, players must explore the entire temple by bringing out all of the tiles in the supply and retrieving 3 keys. Once the entire temple has been explored, the artifact tile is revealed and players must deposit the 3 found keys and retrieve the artifact token. Doing so triggers the endgame stage, where enemies activate twice as frequently and the temple begins to burn down. Players must race back to the start tile to escape the temple before they're consumed by fire or overrun by enemies. The more characters that escape the temple, the better the score. So let's start, as we normally start, by talking about components.
Before we say that,
Okay.
I was going to just kind of chat a little bit about just our general kind of impression of this right now.
All right. Let's go to the punchline. Let's get on the punchline.
Well, not kind of the punchline, I guess, a little bit. So here's the thing. Like, I play like a lot of living card games and things and lifestyle games, and there's a lot of work outside of the game to get some enjoyment out of the game. Like, you got to build your deck, you got to paint models or whatever, and
which you like. You go to the I hear every once in a while you'll tell me like, I have no time, but the next I got to find a game that's going to eat up all my time.
But this is like so much in my wheelhouse right now. This is the kind of game that I feel myself drawn to now, because you put it on the table and you play it, and it's pretty quick to play. Like, with different, having different characters to be able to play essentially makes a different game or whatever. We're going to go more in depth of that. But like Last Bastion, Flashpoint, we were just playing it some more Endangered, Terra. Like, this is like the kind of game I want to play right now.
You get it to the table, you have a full experience, and then it goes away and you're done with it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's such a... And it gives you all the things that you want out of those other games without all the barriers to get to the table. I mean, there's like games like Seventh Continent and stuff that where we're just like, no. you think about it for a second and you're like, not happening.
You're right. And we're trending more towards that. The whole industry is going to these giant campaign Kickstarters with hundreds of hours of play.
Yeah. And it's weird. It's like this big selling point now where it's like, you could play 400 games. You're going to play maybe one game, if that, maybe two. And then your group's going to be the next thing. It's crazy.
Well, this is though a perfect segue to sort of wrap up this thing. Everything you're saying is true, and yet one of the reasons why we're going to talk about how much we like this is that each game is its own thing. Then you're done. But even if you like only want novelty, you've got like a campaign's worth of novelty to find in this game. But we'll get to that. Let's start with let's talk about the components of it.
So this game, You've got this careful outline, but I think
you can go back. Yeah, you can talk about the Kickstarter stuff. Is that what you're going to talk about?
We should put a caveat in this.
You could talk about that.
So there is a lot of controversy with this game, and we kind of got caught in midstream. Kind of learned about it. Terra itself came out, was popular, whatever. Well, I think it went kind of under the radar, and then I think like Trey Parker or somebody was like South Park. He was like, "This is one of my top 10 favorite games" or something.
That's
and
right.
It was like his number 2 or something, and I think everybody was like, "Wait, what?"
And then didn't Z Garcia and Dice Tower have the original rated very highly?
I think it hit some top 10 lists. Yeah. I think the Trey Parker thing, when you've not heard of a game and a celebrity says they like a game, I don't know. It has some kind of,
That was Terra 1, the original, which we'll talk about our thoughts on.
We will.
Okay,
but then what happened is the second one, they did a big Kickstarter for this second one and expansions and stuff, and which has happened very rare, actually surprisingly rarely. They took all the money and then they were like, and again, I'm not an expert in what happened, but essentially people put a lot of money in. Some people put in hundreds of dollars. There was some levels that, I think there was like a $300 or $400 level, something pretty big deal. And even people that put in the $60 or whatever it was, it's a very large investment for anybody to just lose. And what's weird is so I saw them at a local shop, and I picked up the second one so that just I could play.
The game finished and produced but didn't deliver. That's what you're trying to say. So it didn't deliver to Kickstarter backers.
And so there was a moment when we didn't realize this, and it's very likely. And again, I preface it that I don't know this, but it's very likely that we bought somebody's copy of the game.
No,
it's I don't know. It seems very but so. Because we liked it so much, we started looking for the expansions, and I think that's what led us to the Kickstarter.
They were a bit harder to find the expansions.
Somebody had this really scathing.
They've posted that another company has agreed to take over the distribution of this game, and so I suspect the Kickstarter people will get their backers. But this is a case that if you backed, you're at the back of the line ahead of all the people.
So it might be a feel bad for people. Again, we bought the first one, but we knew full well what we were getting into when we picked up the expansions.
Yeah.
So we were able to track a couple down. It's maybe very hard to find it depending on when you're watching this. You know,
The
so
expansions certainly are harder to find, but some of the pieces feel like they're Kickstarter pieces, like some of the embossing on these things.
Yeah. But it's like somebody had a very funny comment. Somebody was like, "What's the difference between this version and the retail? My version, the Kickstarter version, the retail version?" And he's like, "The retail version you'll actually get or whatever." I mangled that a little bit, but you get the gist of it. But okay. So that being said, you know, again, like I don't know all the ins and outs, but that can really kill.
Okay, but Greg, components.
Okay,
they're good. The components are quite good. They're very high quality.
You said it with the I mean, even the boxes. Like,
the boxes have, what are they called? What is that called?
Like
I don't know. They're embossed with like gold leaf.
I mean, it's crazy. Like, I mean, they're like shiny. You can see that shine there. Like, and there goes something. Like, but I mean. It's
the bag with its
it's embroidered, like
embroidery.
An embroidery. I just from some business and stuff that I've done, like embroidery is not cheap.
And those cards; those are just
this
incredible.
Is in one of the expansion, but like the artwork on these and like look at that. That's a shiny it's crazy. Like they're all embossed. Like these guys, their eyes are light up. Like there's
the dice are beautiful. They're recessed.
The colors on all these.
Great.
I mean, there's like gold leaf on everything. Like it's crazy. Like look at these keys have gold leaf. Okay, but aside from that, which is all sort of superfluous but very enjoyable to look at it, it is really cool. They have like, and we'll talk about the volcano part of it and stuff, but it is kind of cool how you flip these over and they become like a flow of lava that the volcano was erupted and stuff. Has a nice big board, clear iconography on them and stuff like that. To track down and also like, I mean, just from like, thematically, it's kind of cool to know like this is going up, like because it's going up to the volcano's top and that's when the volcano blows. I think like little subtle things like that are kind of cute. I like that sort of thing. I think it's kind of neat. The art is pretty good. It's not
quite good. It's all in a nice similar consistent style, but the cardstock is really thick. I mean, everything about working with this, playing with it feels good. It feels enjoyable. And the components are great.
These could have just been cards, and it's a big, huge, chunky piece of cardboard. The meeples are all different colors. Everybody's got their own, colored meeple, which is cool. This piece here is really neat, like because you can flip it over and then that's, showing you what to do, when the volcano has erupted, the changes in the rule, and also has that color, that exciting kind of color there and stuff like that. So, everything is, and I think in terms of ease of play, and we'll talk, I'll hand it up to you to talk about that a little bit more, but like, it makes sense. Like you roll this, it's that symbol. You can see it on that, I put a guy out on that, this, you roll the die, it's a 5. You can very easily see that 5. We'll talk a bit about Subterra, the original. That is a little more difficult to
I
see.
think that's it. You can see that. When you play this game, we've talked about this sometimes. You play a game, you're dealing with an experienced designer. You can feel that this is a second iteration. Yes. And especially when we compare it to the original, everything got improved. Everything got cleaned up, simplified, made more elegant. But we'll come to that in a little bit.
Yeah, I think in general, this is a stellar production, and for the ease of play part, like I'm a huge proponent of this. I mentioned this on the channel a lot, that every bit of like bit that the components do to like lessen the bandwidth of trying to understand the rules of the game allows you to spend more time enjoying the game, right? Like being able to say, that's a 5, I roll a 5, I know that's going to be the thing. This is a space that's clearly a fire spot, and if I'm on that, I'm going to get damaged or whatever. Every bit of that is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so we're segueing a little bit into the iconography and rules and stuff. That's fine. I think you're absolutely right. And we've played some games where like we can't tell if there's a wall there or not a wall there, and as you said, it makes a big difference because all of your time playing this game is spent on the strategic. You don't have to figure out what things mean. But I will say this, and the rule book is good, But we played, I forget what game we played before this, where we were going crazy hating the rule book. But when we got to this game, we were like, this is great. The rule book, it's so simple. You remember what was the game we were playing before this?
The co-op version of Valeria.
Oh, that's right. We hated that.
Yeah.
So when we read this, we read through the rules, we set it up, we were like, it is wonderful to play a game where there's no question, the rules are simple, everything's straightforward. And then we played like 4 games of this, and each game we messed up something.
The first 3 games we made a mistake.
Small mistake. Yeah. So the truth is, this is a good rule book. The information is in there, and there's iconography, but we often wanted a player aid. We wanted a better player aid. It was the player aids here are incomplete, and there are lots of little rules here that you don't think there are there when you first play it, like where the people come out and what you can do when you're downed. There are things that there is no player aid for, and there's nothing on the back of this thing. Like it's a missed opportunity to have a nice player aid. There are a bunch of little things that are very easy to get wrong, and I would be very surprised to if you watched a playthrough of a bunch of groups playing it for the first time, if you didn't see mistakes getting made regularly. So go through this rule book several times before you actually start.
Yeah, I think like again, I think the iconography could not be clearer. I mean, especially like these have it on either side. It says, it shows you the ability, but if you want to have it written out, you can have it written out, which is kind of cool. Also, the icons on these are kind of neat because they suggest that you take one person with each of the symbols so that you're going in with a balanced. And that's one interesting thing, by the way, which we should talk about. Maybe we'll do a little segue here, or not a segue, but a tangent. So I love playing with 4 characters, even if you're playing 2 players. And because you get a lot more, I wanted to do a video about this for a while, discussing the pros and cons of both approaches.
You should do a video of like your strategy for getting that fake rule in, because every game we play where that's not the rule, Greg tries to find some time when he can pretend that the rules say that you play with two-handed.
Yeah. So they call two-handed, double-fisted, whatever. Like again, there's pros and cons to doing that, but this particular game forces you. So if you're playing solo, that's 4 characters you're going to be playing.
3 or 4.
Is it 3 or 4?
Yeah, remember the rules say if you're, at least when you're playing with, you're playing solo, you can play 3 or more. You're playing 2 players, you play 2 each. And then 3 players, you could each take 1.
Yeah, so that's a pretty big deal for some people, and for you, but you did not. We seem to do okay with it.
Well, let's have a little talk about this, because this is interesting. It's true that the 2 of us very much diverge on this in general. If I have a choice, I just want to play one character, like Pandemic. We've played Pandemic. You tend to play it two-fisted. I don't like that. And I think it worked here. It was completely manageable. And part of the reason why I think it's manageable here and not in other places is that there's no hand of cards. That's a big deal. That might seem small, but in Pandemic, you're juggling 2 hands of cards.
That's really, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's really a very interesting observation.
So the table space in front of you is just these 2 cards. You're basically like, here's my 2 characters. Bing, bing, that's it. They don't have any other accessory things except their health. The other thing is, and it's along the same lines as the hand of cards, in Pandemic, there's very tight coordination you have to do sometimes. You're like, I'll go here, I'll hand you this card, then you'll move here, you'll hand me this card. And trying to coordinate that with 4 different characters is just an overload for me. Here, you have to cooperate, but it's not that kind of fine-grained handing off stuff. So that it feels like you could basically, I'm going to do this guy, and often they're in different places doing their own thing.
I think that's an interesting point. I think partly also maybe it's because you can, because you kind of almost like a defined role. This is kind of almost on the level of what we traditionally know as like a Dungeons and Dragons adventuring party, right? You've got your fighter, you've got your cleric to heal everybody, you got your wizard who has a special kind of power, and then you have the thief who can like sneak around it and avoid the traps and things like that. And this game really, I think, I mean, you can certainly. That's one thing we'll talk about, the interesting choices of characters. We are going to talk about that. But like you can see that that's a good baseline to cover all of the dangers of going into this fucking.
Yes, but I think it's good that you mentioned this when we're talking about playing two characters, because it does help. The fact that you're like, this guy's job is this, this guy's job is this. So when it comes to him, you're not. You have less. You can divide your labor, right? You can say, okay, I'm managing this guy. When it comes to his turn, I know his job. But we'll come back to this a little bit. Any more comments about the rules, the setup? I mean, setup is fairly fast, except with the different versions, you have to get rid of all these tiles.
That's with any kind of game that you're like. Yeah. Now, this that's another thing about so I'm talking about that my wheelhouse before, right? Like. This game is like a 5-minute setup.
Yeah, it's pretty fast, except for sorting stuff depending on the expansion. If you have
different expansions. But again, and that's another thing where I'm like, just you get it to the table so much faster, so much easier.
Yeah, it does make a difference. Now, one thing occurred to me when we were talking about these that I think is a little bit of a missed opportunity. We've seen something done in games. So you mentioned, I love this heavy stock of these cards. So on these cards, it's got on the front or on one side a description. You've got their health, and then you've got a description of their abilities. And on the back, there's this for people who are super advanced and don't need the words. It really doesn't help you out, but it's a missed opportunity. And look, it's different art, but it's a missed opportunity to do something that lots of games have done, which is like a male and female side, or you could do something else.
Male and female, or like a slightly tweaked ability.
Yeah. So it's a little odd that on the overleaf is just the iconography for this. It's like a mistake. Who's going to really be preferring to play with this versus the explanation, which is less space and simpler? It's just a weird choice.
So it's actually kind of an interesting for a design point of view, like. I look at this and I want to read the ability so I know the ability. And at first when you were talking about it, I was thinking like if you know the ability, if you know the game well enough to understand this iconography like that, then you wouldn't need to see it. You wouldn't
need to see anything if you knew it so well.
I think if you look, you would have to read this sentence. But if you can just glance down, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's right, I can roll them.
I think by the time you understand each iconography is a bespoke iconography of his shovel.
But I mean, you could see that might be the argument as to why they have it.
I would have much rather had some maybe strategy. You could have strategy tips for how you play this character, or different art of different gender. Anyway,
in terms of the ease of play, I think we went through the rulebook once and we knew how to play. However, I do, because this is good for people watching after they played or whatever, or listening to after they played. Let's just go over quickly what our mistakes were.
Do you remember?
Yes, I do. Okay. Yeah, so it's kind of funny because
you won't remember all of them. There were lots of little ones.
We made a mistake in each of the first 3 games. I do remember 2 of them.
Okay, all right. Let's see.
The second and third. So we made a mistake. The second game, we realized that when you place out a new tile with an Ancient Guardian, that it always comes in with an Ancient Guardian.
That's right.
So that was game 2. That was a big deal.
The initial ones don't start populated. New ones do.
There are a couple little wrinkles like that I think.
And there's a couple ones that where 3 come out. It doesn't say that you don't refresh it, but you don't refresh it. There are lots of things where the tile doesn't have iconography about a rule. You just have to know. All right, what else? What else did we mess up?
The other one was made harder, and that was the fact that the rogue, we got this character, the rogue. We tried that in the second game, and the rogue has a special ability. For 1 action point, they can do a sprint, which is to perform 2 move actions. So for 1 action, you can do. Now, the game itself, you can move 1 space for 1 action, or you can move 3 spaces for 2 actions.
That's right.
And so because of the rogue, that wrinkle made us forget that every character can choose to run.
Sure, and so we forgot to play. That wasn't really a rule mistake, but yes, we did forget. We forget to use that ability.
And so we were going we were exerting to go 3 spaces by taking 3 actions.
What else did we make a mistake on?
So those were the 2.
We made a lot more than that. We made several more. I'll tell you another one we made mistakes of is activating the enemies 2 times.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
1 time, and then when you roll the die, you activate them once, but at the end of the round they go twice, and so there was times when we were activating them,
That was
going
an earlier one,
twice.
yeah. That was
there
within
that.
the first 3 games.
There are, and then there are a bunch of weird rules that we had to look up and had a hard time finding. I forget if they were when you're down, can you crawl? Are you carrying the key? Do you drop the key? There are some little edge cases all over. You're going, but it's not hard to find the answers. But you're gonna make mistakes if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And I do wish there was player aids. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's like, it's crazy with the production of this that there wasn't some kind of card going through like a few of those finer point rules or whatever, like you know, or even some games, which every single game should do this, should say like common mistakes.
Common mistakes.
Right? I mean,
would be very useful for this game.
They do have the explorers in the back to like go over the finer points of their abilities or whatever. But man,
common mistakes. Actually, common mistakes would be a good idea. Let's just make sure there isn't one before we say. Yeah. So yeah, they're all about the explorers. Common mistakes would be super useful. This is a great thing for BGG. You go on BGG, someone will post some player aids. Normally, when we do these reviews, I like to put theme and components right at the front because I'm not so interested in it. It seems not important. But here it feels like theme is a big part of the fun of this game. And this is a case where, like, there are other games that try to capture this theme and they don't work for me. But here, there's something really compelling about it. You want to talk a little bit about the experience, the theme?
I mean, this is a theme a lot of people love, right? And actually, it's not as common as zombies or space battles or trading in the Mediterranean or whatever. But this is a like this whole Indiana Jones.
Jones.
It's funny. It's like that's the name of it. Is Indiana Jones. That it's really strange that like he is just
an iconic movie with that giant boulder.
Yeah, but you know, you're going into this cavern. You're going through the fire traps and you're avoiding the lava and the. You know, there's traps, spike traps, and dart traps, and ancient
rocks that
guardians
can crush you.
And you're trying to go through, and you got to get that relic out. You know, you're doing the whole Indiana Jones with the.
You get to the end,
and then you grab that thing, and the second that you do, the game gets insanely harder.
It's really a wonderful feeling,
and the sense of panic, it's palpable because you know the game is way harder, and you have to get out as fast as you can. And the fact that you're like, maybe not everybody's getting out of this thing.
That's right. That's true.
And then the idea of like trying to like decide when do you sacrifice your people and stuff. So there's actually a lot. I think this game, I don't want to say like it borrows from, but like I'm a big fan of Escape the Curse of the Temple.
That's right. I was going to mention that.
You're not a fan of the timed games in general.
That's right.
But that game, I like when we were playing this, especially with the expansions, which we'll talk about like a little later on. I'm like, that's very similar to the expansion. You know, like it seems like if this was completely made up without ever having them have the Tim Pinder ever having seen Escape the Curse of the Temple, I'd believe that. But if he was like, that's a good idea, I would believe that as well.
But you know, it's really interesting that you mention the real-time game of Escape Curse of the Temple or whatever it is. And this, because what's so interesting here is this almost feels like a real-time game because there's so much pressure, not just at the end, like the end when you get it in the volcano, like every turn it's about to kill you. You feel like you're in a timed game, but even while you're playing, you're so aware of how tight time is that it almost feels like a real-time game. But it's not. And that I love because I don't like the real-time games, but I feel like the time pressure in this game is constant. It is constant. And part of the constant is because Greg is always like, we've got to be exploring those tiles.
Well, we can talk about that a little more. But I mean,
it feels, the point is that you feel the tension in this game. It's palpable on every turn. And even when things are slow, like those guardians come out and they start moving, they're moving slowly, but you feel it. You're like, it's fine now. Everything's fine. And then they start coming out.
There's a real sense of exploration.
That's the other thing.
Because you're always bringing these tiles out, and you're like, and there because of the timing. Sometimes, like Robinson Crusoe does this thing where it's like you can roll 3 dice, or something. You can take 1 action and roll 3 dice, or you can just take 2 actions and automatically do it, right? Rather than risk it. This idea of like,
we're going to talk about mechanics
But in this, because of that, there's this whole thing of like you can reveal a tile to see what it is before you move in, or there's the move in thing. And because of that, it brings this tenseness of like, where you'd have these discussions and it will, like, where you're just like, I'm really nervous about going in here because it could kill me, but
it's so true.
Efficient
yeah,
action.
These are great points. We're going to talk about the action efficiency and stuff, but without going into the details of that, it really creates tension. As you say, the other thing that I almost forgot is there's all this tension about time and getting out and the pace of it all, but this is also like there are a lot of games where you're exploring and often it feels like put it here, put it there. When we play this game, we are like every tile, you think like, okay, so I put a tile this way or this way, but we're like, this is important because we've got to be able to get to all areas of this map to fill it out. And if we make a hard route for ourselves, we're not going to be able to come back through it. And the feeling of exploring and being careful about where you explore. And sometimes you're like, I got to be careful in this area that doesn't matter. If I get 2 good tiles out here, I've fucked myself for this other area. Yeah, leave it out. But anyway, the exploration theme is here and the tension really just, when we played this, we were excited about having a game that thematically was exciting.
And what a incredible, like, and this is the thing about like versus the first Subterra, is that it's just all the tiles are one-sided, but this, to visually like be able to see when the lava starts and you turn these over and you're seeing that lava float, like in the contrast of colors of like this brown, which looks really rich, nice deep brown color, contrasted with that yellow fiery like thing.
Cool.
It looks awesome, and you just feel that. Now I'm often talking about like, I'm always like, oh, it's great to like do these theme nights where you do multiple games, or you watch a movie and you play a game that's tied or whatever, but this is an hour to hour and a half. I feel something.
It's pretty long. These games went pretty long for us.
I think is probably But Escape is like a 10-minute time game. I think you could play a couple of games of Escape. Watch Indiana. Go watch the new Indiana Jones when it comes out in a month or whatever, and then or not. It's probably going to be terrible. And then play Subterra to wrap it up, or play Subterra first and then. As a burn off.
This is a gamer's game, though. I mean, we're going to get to that, but this is a game that you might have a weird time playing in mixed groups. Someone really knows it well, and someone, I mean, they'll enjoy the theme and the tension, but they may not be playing it all that well.
Yeah.
All right, let's start to talk about the meat of this game, the sort of strategy and mechanics. And I think this is our long discussion. Let's sort of walk through it. The first thing you do when you play the game is you choose characters. And I know we don't, maybe that's for a separate section to talk about it, but for both of us, the fact that we've got the expansion here, but there's 10 characters in the base game, and each character makes this game completely different. But okay, I don't want to get us into the characters yet. I want to save that. But I do want to talk about the decisions. So first you're picking the characters, right?
So we've talked about, like when we've played like Orleans, the cooperative expansion for that, or we play like Flashpoint. This game doesn't have the Flashpoint thing where you can change your character out halfway.
That's right.
But it's really fun to kind of look at the characters and look, in terms of the turn 0 or whatever, and to decide like what's our strategy going to be this game, and I think we've looked at it and said, well, should we take 2 characters that can, that are both working on revealing tiles? Should we take could we survive without a fighter? And some of these other scenarios that are available in the expansions offer kind of a different, different challenges. They tax you in different ways, right?
The characters really change the way you play the game.
But then you can basically say, hey, I want to, when we're choosing characters and, it's like, oh, well, I want to take this one and this one. And they're like, wow, we don't have, then we're going to be lacking in this area. Can we do it? Or you look at the characters in turn 0 and say, these 2 characters are going to work well together because of XYZ, and that's why I think we should do this or something. So I think that's very kind of a cool thing, like that mix. I love that turn 0. I love when you can talk about something before the game starts. I think you have both of that in this game. You could randomly get 4 characters and give it a go, or you could have a big discussion about it.
Yeah, although we should say, like, the expansion brings a different way to play, but otherwise you're basically playing the same game every time you play. There are no different scenarios other than the expansion, really.
Yeah.
And one of the odd things that happens in this game is that every tile comes out.
Yeah.
And it's part of the idea of this game that mechanically you've got to bring out every tile. And that creates a very interesting optimization puzzle. It's a we've seen this in a couple games, and it's sort of, if a game is designed for surprise and theme and experience, often it'll be like, well, it'll be great. One game you'll get this horrible thing that creates this, and one game you won't. And you're sort of trading off luck and randomness for excitement. And here, this is a controlled optimization puzzle. You know that there's going to be 4 dart traps in the map, and once 3 are down, you've got 1 left, and you're trying to strategize about how to bring it up.
So just to diverge a little bit for a second on a little kind of tangent, we had talked about this before, how when we were playing Initiative, there's a set number of tiles, and that game is very it's kind of code breaking. That game, I think it's really kind of a great game. A little mix.
This is the game you finished when we were in purgatory without me, so I don't get to ever finish it.
This is a point of contention. But you had made this little sheet that had like all those things. So when you pull the tile, essentially you would you say, okay, we've got that tile, we've dealt with it, and then you put it on its space on the sheet. And once you filled that sheet up,
did you make a sheet like that when you played it with Jill?
No, I did not. Okay. So I think that's kind of a cool thing you can do. You can visually see it, but also it's kind of nice to know what's left in the bag. I mean, a lot of people might think that that's cheating, or maybe that's extra information. It's not cheating, but it's just giving yourself, your mind isn't being taxed with remembering things. And certain games, of course, are built around memorizing, right? Like memorizing the order of things or whatever. I mean, that's the whole game is how much you can remember. And I do think, I remember playing a game with my friend Kat, and she went to recount all these tiles or whatever, and I'm like, maybe just make a decision and just go with that. We don't need to make a 100%.
You're slowing down the game too much.
Yeah, you're slowing down. The game's enjoyment is less than, and everybody enjoys things differently. But for me, I find when I'm playing a game, make the best decision you can, and it's just more enjoyable for all the other players at the table.
Sure, you have to calibrate how much time you spend thinking with the game, nature of the game, and the other people at the table.
You could spend 10 hours to make the best decision. That's too much. Or you could just take a reasonable amount of time and say, this might not be the best decision, but it seems like the best,
Sure, it depends on the group, and it depends on where you are in the game and how difficult it is.
But for us, it's kind of cool sometimes in a game of open information. But I think you really hit the nail on the head absolutely correctly, that this game is completely made great because of that 30 tile thing. You have to get all 30 tiles out, and then, so it does a couple things really well. You have a time clock, which, do you remember the game that didn't have the clock that failed because of it?
I do remember that we talked about
the Alien.
That's right, Alien Nostromo.
Nostromo, yeah, Beta Nostromo. So this game has you have a certain amount of tiles to get through, and if that volcano goes off before you've gotten the artifact, you're dead. Yeah. In fact, I've done some, Jesse was alluding to before, one of the big strategies in this game, and if you're having trouble, you're I can't beat it or whatever, to me, you need, by turn 8, this is what I kind of figured out. When you have 8 turns left. So we were playing on the hard difficulty, which I believe was 18, if my memory serves me. You started with 18 turns, 4 players, 4 characters. You have 10 turns to get 30 tiles out, which means that every pass of 4 characters, you need to get 3 tiles out, which isn't a big deal, right? That means you have to be in the right position, you have to kill the enemies, you have to move around, heal, all that stuff, and you still have to get 3 tiles out. So that's kind of you
have to constantly be exploring,
and you might
to
think
beat this
8
clock.
turns is a lot, but the thing is, once you grab the artifact, it goes twice.
Starts doubling, yeah.
And when the volcano goes off, it really, and that's between, so that's the first thing, having to get all those tiles out. And yes, it does give, some people like the idea that this is a mystery. I don't know, a lot of games the first version of Subterra, you take some of the cards out so you don't have perfect information.
That's right.
But to me, you got to get them all out. And then the other thing is once you pick up the artifact, the thing flips, you're rolling twice, the 2 dice, which we haven't discussed yet. But rolling,
dice,
the enemies are going twice as quickly. The bad stuff is happening twice as fast, and not only that, but the timing goes twice. The end of the round, you no longer have 8 rounds. You now have 4 rounds essentially, and so it moves so much quicker. So I feel like those are the two things. If you're having trouble, you get your tiles out as quick as you can.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We could talk about strategy a little bit, but one thing that we sometimes have a hard time doing in these long reviews is talking about the choices, and I do want to sort of try to force us to do that.
Let's do it.
So, once you've got your characters, this game, when we played it, we were like, why can't we choose the order that we go in? And that's an interesting thing. But so that order is fixed, and on your turn, you've got 4 action points. No, you don't. You have 2 action points. You have 2 action points. And then you can stress to get it first. Okay, so you've got your 2 action points. You've got your basic actions that everyone can do and the cost of them. You can reveal. And this is, again, this gets back to this time issue because you could just look in, peek in, right? Or this is a little bit like the Robinson Crusoe, different twist on it. Or you can just say, I'm going to walk right in. That's faster, more efficient, except if it's a bad tile and you're not suited for that tile, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, if you walk in, there's a few things that are the most deadly thing in the base game is the spike trap. You walk in, and it's going to deal you 3 damage, which will kill most of the characters. There's a few characters that can survive at full health, but you don't always have full health. So walking, like if you reveal the tile, well, you have to walk into it, and that's your whole turn. Or you could reveal a tile, walk in, and then do it again, and you've gotten much farther so that you can reveal more tiles and branch out.
And it's like when we play the game, this game, like we talk a lot when we play this game and debate stuff, but it's so interesting. Even those small decisions about should I just walk in, your head's running that meme with that woman calculating. You're like, how many spike traps are there? How much time do we have? Is this character got enough health? If they die, is someone nearby to help them? So those calculations for even just that decision, walk in or look in and then move. Just that little decision, we chew over and over again.
Yeah, you think about it, like if it's a key, I can just pick it right up or whatever. But if it's an enemy, like, and you walk right in, it's like, well, how are you going to deal with that enemy, right? Like, because if it activates, it's going to kill you. Also, making a big deal is like you're like, well, I need access. Some of the characters, I need access to like multiple paths. Then the other thing is like if you move in, you're like, if I end up sitting on one of these fire traps. Nothing bad will happen to you unless you roll the fire die.
Right.
And but the fact is everybody's rolling the die, so that's something you can take multiple damage.
Turns.
Also, if you open up a dart trap, doesn't do anything to you right away, but if multiple players are on a tile,
that's right. So that's
the math of it. There's so much math.
It's a great point because you're not just making these decisions for yourself. And often, Greg, because the clock is so tight, you're saying, well, look, ideally, I wouldn't walk in there. But you have nothing to do on your turn unless I open this up for you because we've got this clock. So all of those things make every little decision here important. And you've got 2 action points. They're precious. You're like, I cannot waste them. And then the game, on top of your basic actions, throws this little twist in where you can exert to get an extra action point.
But you're spending your health to do it.
It costs you 1 health to do it. And then you've got a risk that if you roll the heart, you take an additional heart.
So
you're pushing your luck.
But the fascinating you are pushing your luck a little bit. The fascinating economy of that action and design space that they've used here is that you're healing for 1. I mean, when you get to the end, before you grab that artifact, you cannot be next to death or you'll lose. We've done that in the first few games. You have to be topped off because you will take so much damage leaving the temple. And the thing is, like, you're sort of borrowing that time. So you're spending a point of health in the beginning of the game. And then, and then at some midpoint, you're recouping that, right? But you're using it, but you also might have to pay the tax if you roll that die. But there is a secondary decision point, which is a really fun decision point, which is like, let me spend some of my health so that if I'm at a point when I don't have anything else to do, I don't waste my actions. I can just top off my health.
It's exactly right. It's a really interesting decision because it involves some slightly longer term planning. And also in your computations are like, this character only has 3. So I really have to be much more careful about exerting myself. And also, if I get down, what's beautiful in this game is there's no elimination. If you get killed, you basically just fall down.
Yeah.
The enemies start ignoring you, and you crawl one
Yeah.
space. It's
That's
very
all you go.
inefficient, but you're still in the game. And so when you're making these calculations of should I exert, should I take this risk, you're also running the calculations of, can someone get me if I go down? How close am I to someone else?
Which, and I don't want to talk too much about the base of Terra, but like that game, when you're eliminated, you can't move. And so if you get eliminated and you're playing like a legitimate like 4-player game, not at 2 people, you're done. You're no one's ever coming back for you. You're dead. You're done. And whatever killed you is still there around. So there's no saving you.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, this game just
for
show all
sure,
those things.
for
and
sure.
improve them.
It's
And that's
actually
such a great.
it's very clever also because once you're down, you can crawl, but then basically nothing messes with you. So you kind of switch to a different mode, and you can get yourself back in the
It's
action.
a really fascinating thing because I think like player elimination is a hotbed, like a kind of a big issue for gamers, right? Like I know for me, like a game where you can get eliminated, like it's got to be short because like getting eliminated sucks because then you're like, oh well, have fun, guys. I'm just gonna hang out here and wait and not be able to participate anymore. But the thing is, like in this game, I think is a great design choice because
Brilliant.
you can still you're like I can still move towards whoever, right? And I'm making some headway. The game is punishing you because you're not doing any actions that are helping things, but you're still rolling the enemy die.
But you can
antagonist
still
die.
get yourself
But
back
you can
into the
st-
fight.
and and then the other player's like, okay, well, I can, if you come closer, I can come to you and try to stand you up. And then once you're up, you can try to heal yourself or heal, like it leads to a lot of interesting choices.
Okay, so then in addition to the exerting to do extra actions, the player powers, frequently some of them are like, this costs 3. So the only way you ever use it is if you exert. And that's a really interesting decision point. You're like, is it worth this risk? Should I do this really great power? And some of the powers are very cool. And then the healing issue is another, like you pointed out, if you get to a point where you have nothing good to do and you're full health, then you know, okay, this is bad. I've wasted some opportunities here. So you're sort of tempted to exert.
The other push your luck element in here I think is really cool is the tiles that are the rubble tiles. So digging them out is expensive. And there's a very low probability. First of all, you have to roll on the die that the rubble is going to come down, right? And then you have to roll the die to say where the rubble is going to fall. And it creates a really, and we didn't really talk about this in the thematic part, but you're standing on that rubble tile and you are like, this could kill me instantly. Like any character in the game, almost. There's like 2 that can survive and 15 that can't.
It's very unlikely to happen, but if it happens...
does, and especially like we had a game where we had like 3 characters standing on that.
Yes,
the rubble
we
came
did.
down, game over instantly. But that was stupid. It was stupid to leave, but you have to take risks, like
this is also, that's one of your favorite elements in games when
yeah,
when you can watch me get killed. Like you're like, okay, at this point, maybe I'd like to win 50% of the time, but 50% of me wants you to get killed tragically.
It's because I'm like, you probably shouldn't stay on that tile, and you say,
that's never gonna happen.
What are the odds?
Yeah,
and as soon as you say, what are the odds, I think like, oh, please, 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 please.
Okay, so
there's a little bit of a...
okay, but through choices, what other choices are there? You've pointed out that a huge area of choices is revealing tiles. It's really it's like a major player in this game, figuring out, and often when we play, like 1 or 2 of the characters has some twist they can do with revealing. And when we play that, all of a sudden the coordination of the game is like, how do we let this person, how do we let this character do their work? Like, how do we support this character? Because being able to choose where you put tiles is huge. Like, if you can make a nice, clean path to the exit. So when we play the games, a big chunk of our games is strategizing, how do we get this person to do their job and reveal us some good tiles?
And I mean, like, you don't think it's a big deal to say, are you going to put the tile this way or this way or this way? Because you have to connect it, right? There's a lot of discussion that goes into like, if we put it this way,
the choice of how to orient
this way. You don't want to cut the map in half because so that you can't get from one side to the other. Yeah, there's like moving around. I mean, it's crazy how nuanced it is.
Should we spread apart so we can explore the map more efficiently? But then if we get in trouble, how do we get back together?
And that's one of the most brilliant other aspects of this game is the fact that like they essentially like you can just kind of go on these meandering paths, but the longer you make, you want to fill it in as tightly as possible, because the exit, the relic comes out in the farthest point.
That's right.
And the thing is, like, you can't, and you're confined, so it forces you to like try to make a tight optimization puzzle.
Yeah.
So you're balancing like the efficiency and the push your luck of, hey, do I exert to get these extra actions? Do I risk walking in, or do I take more time to reveal and then walk in? Then how are we putting the map? How are we spreading our characters out?
And as
how
you
are
said,
we protecting our characters? How are we, should we go fight now? Should we wait for the enemies to come to us? Should we dig out now? Should we risk standing under this? If we dig out, it's a lot. It's your whole turn to dig something out. Are you going to risk doing that if it's going to fall down? Like, when should you dig that out? Should you push everybody through and then spread out? There's all of these, like it's so much.
And I think the point about the exploration of the tiles is a really important one, because you can choose to some good degree how the map gets built and what areas of the map are harder to get into and easier. And you really do end up, we often lose a game because we're split up and we have not designed it so that we can get back together. And that's rare in these games. I can't remember another exploration game that's so serious about building the map, about you only have a choice how to orient it, but those differences add up, and soon you find yourself in a map, and not just where to put them, but who's going to do the exploring, because some people are better at organizing it. And
well, I mean, and that's the thing, like sometimes you're like, I'm better at doing this, but you're closer, or like we're gonna, I mean,
we don't have time.
I got to talk about some of these characters soon, because like it's because there's some characters that are really good at fighting, and we've left like a rear guard character to say, I'm gonna stand here, I'm gonna protect everybody going up the path, and that's you talked about my ability to like always be like, we gotta get tiles out, because
Greg's very good with keeping us on the clock.
You're like planning the whole route out. Like, I think you should have like the tie and the hard hat. I'm in charge. I'm a supervisor, but I'm also a construction guy. There's that whole meme or whatever. But that's you. You're always like, this is our path. This is how we're gonna go.
Yes,
and that's a huge part of it. And then
the
great part of it is that it's not just like that. It's that, well, we did get a tile that we didn't want in that spot. All right, let's shift and use this other lane to come down.
And then you got characters that can adjust things. Like we'll talk about that.
But that's the thing, coming back. That's the whole thing.
Yeah,
it's not just heading there, but it's the idea that you're going to have to come back through this.
Yeah,
whole
that's a
thing.
Wonderful thing.
Makes me think of Mad Max.
Well, wait, hold on. Let me just jump in.
Yeah.
This is such a good point to bring up, because we've talked about how the decisions of how you explore are so important, and the super clever thing here that you have to get back is the key to that whole damn puzzle. The fact that you're so concerned with building the right map, because you've got to not just get to the end, but get back. That means every decision you make about making it extra space to go through or extra dangerous comes back to haunt you.
And then towards the end of the game, you have to kind of make that decision too. Like, realistically, who's getting out of here? I mean, because like you gotta look at it.
So
like,
good.
There's no way everybody's like, whatever the map is, it's like, who's taking the relic? Yeah. I have more health. I'm but I'm faster at running or whatever. Like, well, there's a bunch of enemies pulling up at the bottom. How do you want to do that? And so like that's such a
it's got that psychological element too. Like, we can surely get one of us out, but should we try to get all of us out? And who's going to run with it? And also, so those are great decisions, but there's also some interesting little decision about like, when is it the right time? You're in this rush, but you're like, maybe we better heal up a bit before we have to make the run for it. And the decisions about like their enemies, and you're like, do we need to pause and get rid of some of these enemies, or should we just run for it?
Yeah. I like Hold'em, Texas Hold'em, was like massively popular for like 10 years. It was like huge. I mean, it's still very popular, of course. And I think that because that game, and this is very similar in a lot of ways, parallels, because the psychology of that game is like, you look at your hand, I've got 2 cards, betting round. Everybody bets, you're going to bet or you're going to fold, right? Or you're going to call or you're going to fold. And then the flop comes out, and that changes everything. And now you look at your hand, you look at where you're at now, bet, fold, call, whatever. And every time a card comes out, the flop and the turn and the river, everything changes. Your odds all change, and and I think that's why that game was so popular and so interesting, because it had those moments. And this game has the same kind of thing where like you're just constantly having to shift. You have a plan, and then you got to shift to a different plan, which is fantastic.
Well, and the enemies really help that. The enemies are these little. They start out little minor things, but then you start have to say, well, we have a bigger problem coming. All right, so maybe we should segue into that.
Characters.
You want to talk? Yeah. You want to talk about characters?
Well, we're talking about so much about.
Let's talk about the characters.
Yeah. In the base game, like there's the revealing characters, right? Like you have
10 characters in the base game. That
so
is very generous, and they are so different.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely. So the most important thing that you can do in the game is to reveal, as I said. Well, the jobs are the fighting. There's enemies; they got to be dealt with. And one of the expansions we played only one time, and so far we just played. We were trying to go through like a world tour type thing, which I guess we should probably save till another discussion. But you got to have a fighter because there's a lot of enemies. You got to have some kind of solution for that. But you have to be able to get these tiles out, and then there's the healers, right? Which is a couple healing characters to keep you going. So they have which is essentially action advantage, because if you can spend your health to take an extra action, if somebody can heal you for twice of that,
that's right.
Then you're getting, you're getting some that there. And then there's the characters that change the board to make the board easier to traverse. Right.
Now, one thing you love, before you get into the details, you love these double abilities. You love when these characters have two abilities.
Well, we played the two new pandemic styled inspired games, which were the World of Warcraft pandemic game, and then the Star Wars Clone Wars. And they have like a major ability and then kind of a minor ability, each of them. And I thought that's so cool to me. Because that minor ability, you can never have your whole character on that, but it does come in handy sometimes, and it does change the way you're thinking about things. But yeah, the major abilities. So the archaeologist has like this amazing thing where you can draw a tile, and instead you draw two and you choose one. That's a route planner, right? But you're getting tiles out at the same rate. But you have 5 health, and she also has a secondary power. I'm not going to go through all the powers.
But let me stop you here. Just talk about that character and some of the other tile adjusters. One of the things that's so great about this, we play these games with character abilities. We love games with variable character powers. Sometimes you play a game, you're like, all right, they're a little different. They play a little different. This one's like, if you have these route planners, you're like, okay, our whole overarching strategy for how we're going to win this game is different. We're going to plan a great route to the thing and a great route back, and that's going to change everything about the way we play. And if you don't have one of those, you're like, well, we have no control of the route, so we're going to have to be better at fighting people and surviving traps. It's like you play different characters here, you're going to play the game completely differently.
Well, I think that's
it's a different puzzle. It's a puzzle to figure out how to use these characters to win.
Yeah, I mean, you could not win the game without special abilities. So when you have different abilities, it changes the game completely. And I think that's what gave Pandemic such a great amount of legs, right? Sure. It's like we played like tons and tons of games of Pandemic because there's those different kinds of characters, and the game is played completely different. There's probably 30 different character roles that you can play for Pandemic now.
All the expansions.
With all the expansions.
Not 30, but...
Yeah, there's at least 20. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, so that's really good. Flashpoint. Recently I've been playing. So we played probably half a dozen games of Flashpoint, and then my wife and I went through and we played like I think a dozen games to try going through all the different iterations. And then just last night I played. Just like I'm gonna try a couple. And at the end of our
just last night you played more Flashpoint. Didn't I just say I wanted to play more Flashpoint?
Well,
what is happening?
At the end of our...
Greg has to go. Greg has to be playing. Greg has to be playing, so I can't hold it against him.
But we got to the end of that sort of playing through all the iterations and expansions and stuff, and I'm like, I'm dry on these characters. Yeah. I'm like, there's not enough. They need more characters in that game because they only would have like an expansion coming out with one new character or whatever, and that wasn't enough. And some of the characters weren't very good or really even useful, and especially since you could switch out characters, they need a lot more characters. And like this game, like Pandemic in this game, there's a lot of characters.
And 10 in the base game. It's amazing. I don't remember any other game that's come with... And they're all winners. They're all fun to play. And I think, like Flashpoint and Pandemic, they change the way that character plays. And they do change the way the group has to play. But this one, more than even any of those, swapping the difference between one character and another, the whole group's going to have to adjust to that. If you don't have a good healer, you can't be taking chances fighting as much. And if you've got a good route planner, you can do whole different strategies.
Yeah. So let's kind of like, and I was kind of going through, but let's just hit them real fast.
Yeah.
The rogue is very interesting because they move fast, they move extra fast, and they avoid all traps. The rogue is very fascinating because you're like, okay, if you stand on a trap, anybody else that comes in, you know, you can kind of like say, hey, I move fast, but if I hold up and I stay here for a minute, everybody else can pass safely through the trap. But you're sacrificing time, and we had a lot of discussion about using them. Also, because they move fast and they avoid traps, you can build a route back that has the traps. And the rogue is one of the best characters especially when you pair him with one of my favorite styles of character, which is the aristocrat. The aristocrat can allow somebody to make a move action. So between the aristocrat and the rogue, you can cover a ton of ground really quickly. I think the first game we won, we used that combination. But the aristocrat also allows you to put these special tiles out. It takes her whole turn to do so, but you can use that to really open up a lot of, like, you know, have that central column that Jesse usually likes to have.
And one quick thing before you continue. One of the clever things from a game design perspective is the hearts, the health of each of these can be tweaked a little bit. So like the balance of these players are so well balanced, partly because they're just like, all right, this power is overpowered, this character's overpowered, let's give them a very low health, and then everyone has to be protecting that character. Yeah.
So you can't like, and by that you can't use your health pool as a tool to kind of exert. The sapper, fascinating as well, because you can use them to blow holes in the walls. So if your route isn't perfect, you're much more likely to put out tiles knowing you can blast a hole through. And it also leads to some interesting discussions of, like, if you want people to regroup, or you want to explore off that tile, you just blow a hole in it. And he also is very good at eliminating, like,
he can kill enemies. He's good at fighting. But this is another good example of how tight an optimization puzzle and how well it's done. He's got, what, three holes he can blow on walls. So you're like, should we use it now, early on, and take advantage of it? Or do we wait until it's a clutch moment when he can blow a hole in? And that's the great decision. That's so clever. Like, he's only got a small number of them. So you can't just use his power everywhere he wants. You have to make a tight decision.
Speaking of limited uses, the most debate-driven character would be the foreman. He's able to do this shore-up thing where you can cover that, and that's such a cool thing too. Like, you just cover that special token that's there, and you know that never. And
he can block whatever special thing, whether it's an enemy tile or a trap or anything. He goes there, he covers it up.
It's not so easy when you think about it, because covering up these, like the rubble tokens, means that you can have a clear shot to get through if you need to. Covering up an enemy keeps one from being close to you, but they're going to keep coming out anyway.
They come out anyway.
So there was like some games where we thought, like, let's try to cover up as many as we can so the enemies take a long while to get to you. It's
part of a market how deep the strategy here is, that when you see this, you're like, oh, he's going to break the game. He could just cover up an enemy. But nope, you can only do it a couple times, and you cover up an enemy, it just pushes them farther away from you, which is an advantage, but you can't break it. None of these powers that seem like they would break the balance of the game, none of them do.
Especially since he has to be on the tile to
He has to get to the tile,
so,
that's
like,
right. A trap, he's got to walk in and
dig it out and go in, or the trap.
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
Yeah, the marksman I remember thinking was going to be amazing, but the thing is, like, because she can keep going in a straight line, but this game does not have. This is the kind of character you look at and you think, that's the one, until you play it, and then you're like,
oh, there are very few straight lines in this place.
The healer is pretty.
We have a hard time making the healers work.
Yeah, but you very useful, a very useful character. The veteran is one of the more interesting characters that we use, because you have a brace action you put to have this whole special brace token to put on her. She can kill for one, so immediately eliminate one enemy, which isn't as good as a tapper who can kill. But his balance is that he has to do it on a tile that's not his tile. But we used her quite a bit to decide, am I going to choose to brace so that I don't take any damage the whole next turn? But then they have this cool thing where
little twist. You love these little twists.
But like,
you can't do it twice in a row. Once you do it, it's gone for the next time.
Her strategy of, like, using her as like a rear guard, like I said, where we move away from the guardians, and then we know she's going to be there to block, and she has a large health pool, so you're pushing with her a lot, and you have people coming up. That's a really cool combo piece to use her. I thought she was, like, very, very interesting. And using the ability to brace, you can't use it next turn. So is this the turn to use it? Is the next turn to use it? Very fascinating. This Beastmaster with the dog, that's awesome.
Pretty fun. A little complex to figure out how to
it's
work
another
that.
neat little puzzle, but having the little dog meeple was so much fun, like so cool. Like, I mean,
And some
any
fun
kind of game when you're
decisions.
like, oh, your character has a pet,
Dog,
you're like,
yeah.
yes.
I'll
I
take
mean,
it.
absolutely.
But it's clever. You can call him back to you. He sort of can absorb hits, right?
Yeah.
But
So this
only if
dog-
he's on your space.
So the dog was a great, like, I mean, I put up a little, I sent Jesse a meme about it because we basically, anytime you needed something cleared out, like they would take damn. I mean, you just sent the poor dog, and he would just, But it was like a respawnable, sort of. The fortune teller was by far the most powerful character for us. I mean,
I don't know about that, but it was certainly fascinating. We
Yeah.
also we looked. This is a great example of this game and the confidence of and the skill of the design. We looked at this character, right? So explain how the character works. It's
so
really
she has
weird.
this scrying power, which will basically you draw a tile from the bag, and you can decide not to reveal it. Okay, and you can just return it to the bag.
Right.
But
That's the boring ability. You love scrying.
I do love it. But the thing is, like, there's a number of these characters that do this thing where you can throw the tile back. But the problem is that you never want to put a tile back because you want to just be able to reuse,
But for an emergency. But then...
the thing is that she can put it out next to anybody that can have a tile, another explorer. And we were using, like, the dog and stuff. That's a great combo. You put the Beastmaster somewhere, his dog somewhere else, and a third person somewhere in some other location, so they're spread out. We sat somebody with the fortune teller, and all they did was absorb hits for her, heal her, so she could exert every single turn and put out every tile where we wanted it to go. But we had to continually move our characters to open up more and more areas so that she could put the precise...
It's a very weird strategic... You're like, we need to have lots of fronts open so that we can choose where to put it. But
which was changing the way we played.
Yeah, completely changing. Now, her second ability is so weird.
You wouldn't even need this because she's so powerful with that. But she has another thing. It takes her whole turn, but you can draw one of these over-the-top produced cards that are like gorgeous, like shiny, crazy cards that I was pointing out before, which in the biggest miss don't show...
Don't say what they do.
So Jesse had to print out.
I mean, it's in the rule book, but it's a whole crazy sheet.
I can't believe they did that.
Why would they not put that text on the cards?
So it's a crazy power because it's so inefficient. Like, I mean, some of the effects
very inefficient.
You have to take your whole turn to draw a card. Is that card helpful? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, it could be the card that you need that'll turn the game completely around, or it can be something you absolutely won't need. But on top of that, playing the card can sometimes take your entire turn. So they are really not.
So they're very strange abilities. Well, you say they're not worth using. I don't agree.
Well, it depends on what.
The little twist that makes that character so interesting, though, and I mean, first of all, it's just a stylistic thing. You could imagine one person loving playing that character. The other thing the little twist here that makes it so interesting is you can just pocket that card. You've got nothing. Whenever you don't have anything good to do, or maybe early in the beginning, you draw a couple of those, and then you can save them for the right moment. They have that flavor where, like, at the right moment, remove all the enemies on the board. Yeah, they could really save you, and so it's fun to be like, let me get a couple cards. I have nothing better to do. Yeah. I'll be rear guard. I'll just pick up a couple cards, and then in an emergency, this will save us.
Yeah. Well, we did one game. We had lost. And we thought, if we can just draw there was one card we knew we could draw. And I just spent like 2 or 3 turns trying to draw the Hail Mary card. Didn't draw it. And we lost. I mean, we'd lost anyway. But it's kind of an interesting, like, you could see like a stand-up moment. Yes, we got the thing that'll completely turn the game around. But
it's not all luck. Like, you could absolutely see a reasonable strategy, drawing a couple cards early, and then planning the rest of your game almost around those cards.
The Escape Artist is... fantastic. I mean, like, you can walk through walls. Yeah. Enemies ignore you, but also there's a very cool part. The great part about that is that, like, it led to some very fascinating, like, discussions of, like, hey, we have a real problem here, but I can go through the walls and I can do this crazy move and push myself or whatever. When you combine it with the aristocrat who can move you, that's awesome. But the best part of her is that she can strike.
She jumps out of the shadows.
You can kill someone, like, immediately kill them, but you lose your ability to fade. And so now you can no longer go through walls until the next round, and enemies will see you, which is so awesome. Yeah, really. And it led to some really fascinating discussions of, like, should I fade? Should I strike? Or should I, like, stay hidden?
And sometimes there's some strategy behind coming out of the shadows, because then you could draw them away. Okay.
The biggest miss we had was the magician, because she takes.
You skipped over the strong man.
Oh yeah, well,
I like that.
Okay, well,
He's just got heavy health,
Yeah.
so he's like a tank, and he goes in, and it's easy to underestimate how valuable it is to have someone with lots of health. He can just go into enemies. The enemies are very dangerous in this game. They're slow but dangerous.
But he can do a thing where he kills everybody. But he has the staunch ability where you can re-up all your health. But you
That's
got to
right.
be really careful, because he has to exert to do it. So you can never go below 2 health, or you can't use his staunch power, which is a very clever design as well. I think that the abilities that have the, the push to do it. But the magician, like, I thought was terrible, because you replace a tile. You don't even remove the enemies. You still leave whatever enemies, and you put like one of these safe tiles down. But the fact is that you have to get that tile back out.
Yeah.
So you could argue that it's worthwhile for her to do it at the end of the game, right? When you want to make a path. But at that point, like, you're in such a hurry to get out that, like, you don't want to have to replace those things. So I think she was kind of like, she does have a cool power where she can switch with another explorer, which is great. But if she had a secondary power that was useful, but she, I think, was terrible.
We played her once. We couldn't make good use of it. Although I do want to say this thing that we sometimes forget to say is that sometimes you play these games with these characters and you're like, this person's not as good. And you think, okay, so I don't want that. But really, when we play these games, we want them to be hard. And the idea of taking a different character that makes it harder, there's nothing wrong with that. You're just playing a slightly harder game. As long as you're still forced to adapt a strategy around them, it's useful. And then the inventor.
Yeah, terrible.
We didn't love it. We didn't. Her inventions are not quite up to snuff.
It's crazy because when you look at her, you're like, "This is amazing. This is going to be the greatest character." And then you play her. It is interesting that there's some of those like characters that like you automatically reach for when you first starting a game, and then there's the like more nuanced characters or whatever that are second or third picked.
But that's an example where she's got an ability like a Barry, and we're like, we played her, and we're like, what's the point of this? But maybe, like, you could imagine if you were forced to play with that a couple times, you might develop some interesting strategy. There are some interesting strategies, and everything's limited resources. I mean, but every character is fascinating, a different puzzle. It really is a different puzzle.
Yeah. So strategy, there is a ton. I mean, there's tactical decision. There's long-term decisions. You have a basic strategy that keeps changing. You're strategizing to synergize between your characters before the game starts, during the game.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's so much. This is just dripping with strategy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I look for in these games is short-term tactical combined with some long-term planning abilities. And yes, when we start this game, we come up with a little bit of a plan, and we're making a long-term plan, how to get the exit, where we're planning to put the exit, how to get out, who's going to do what job. And then you constantly have to revise that plan, because every roll of this dice, a new enemy comes out, and you're like, we've got to revise this, or we've got to switch. Like, our plan was to rush, and all of a sudden, one enemy, you're like, we can survive. Two enemies, then you're like, okay, wait, we've got to stop. There's too many enemies. We are not going to be able to go out the way we thought.
That's another strategy, though. If you kill all the enemies, this roll of the die is like a free pass every time.
We just played Pandemic, where we eradicated a disease, and it's a little bit of that decision. You're like, all right, it's going to take us some time to get rid of everyone, but if we get rid of everyone, then every time we roll that die, it's going to be a total whiff, and it's very tempting. And sometimes you're tempted to do things that you should not do.
And now, speaking of the die and kind of luck and randomness and stuff, like, there are two big areas of luck/randomness.
Yeah, let's talk about this first.
Number one is the order that the tiles come out in.
Yes.
Okay. But the thing is, like, you're always going to get all those tiles. And the order that they come in does affect you. But you can, that is just another area, I feel, that you can plan.
Well, with one exception. Yes, it does mean you should really try to plan it. And, you're going to get these traps. But there's some real luck here, and you could absolutely have a really bad game. It's the enemies where the luck really feels like it can make a huge difference. If you get 3 enemy tiles very early, they're just pouring out at you.
I don't know if that's true, though, because they start with the one on them, sure.
They start, and then every time you roll, if you've got 20 turns, every roll they're moving and attacking, whereas if they come out at the very end of your stack of tiles, you've spent most of the
But I
game
think-
with very few
I think
enemies
that-
coming out.
That's a manageable thing though, sure. Like, and I think every game, it's just like any cooperative game, you could have a poor
Sure.
draw on the like a setup of Pandemic, of course, or like
Sure.
if you're playing Flashpoint, as we mentioned, like you just happen to get the wrong
Yeah.
roll for fire.
But
or whatever.
I mean, you've kept track of how many games we played. I did feel like for a game that's such a tight optimization puzzle, it's fun even when we get killed. But I did feel like the luck of the tiles and the dice. Like we could play.
So that's the second piece.
Okay,
So
all
the
right,
tiles
all right,
one.
okay.
That's one piece.
Right.
Okay. Then the second piece of there's actually three areas of luck.
Okay.
The second piece of luck is the die.
All right. You
of
could
course-
get
yeah.
very unlucky. And it's not like when you risk your exertion, that's on you. I risked my health. I took half the time I get punished for it. But you can get very unlucky. You could have 3 or 4 turns in a row where new enemies are coming out, and it really makes it a lot
But it's-
harder. You could
the
have
likelihood
games,
of we did have a couple of games that a lot of enemies came out, but then you just have to strategize differently. I don't know. One of the interesting points there too, though, is the last point of rolling is when it comes to killing enemies. If you take somebody that's a fighter or has ability to kill automatically,
That's right.
that's very useful. But sometimes, like, there's characters that can kill for sure for 2, or you can risk rolling the die.
That's right.
So, like, you might roll it twice and fail both times, or you might do it once and then be successful and have that second. And then that's a really great push your luck moment as well, as to like when you're going to risk doing that.
They are the push your luck here is worth talking about. For me, it's sort of the key of this whole thing. But I do think for a game that feels so much like a tight optimization puzzle, I wish there was a little less swinginess in terms of it's really the enemies that you could get unlucky for 4 or 5 turns in a row and be just overrun, or with the tiles. I guess for me, it would be nice, and maybe it's this that causes that to happen. You could just get this 3 or 4
But
times
on
in a row.
the other hand, like you could be rolling all the movement things when you don't have the enemy. So I guess
Yeah.
I think it balances itself out.
Yeah, I think
And if you get all the enemies in the beginning, you spend some time, kill all the enemies, and then the rest of the game, you're not going to get those enemy tiles, and you're not going to have to deal with them as much
the
unless you.
tiles less of a concern than the die. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if you roll lucky on the dice, you can have an easy game or a really super hard game, and you could say, well, that's the way these games works.
That's what I would say.
But it might be nice to find for a game that's so heavily focused on optimization and a puzzle. I would like to see a little less of that. But it's still fun, and it's a little. The point you always make is the more randomness, the shorter the game, and it's a little bit of on the long side of
It
a
is,
game to have such swinginess happen. But it's exciting even when you lose.
I mean, we just played a game of Pandemic, and the very first draw we had like an epidemic, and it had like a big double outbreak. Game was instantly over.
Yeah.
It can happen
it
in
can
any.
happen.
It's like any game you can.
Sure, it's not a deal breaker. It's not a deal breaker. It's a little. Sometimes when you had a victory, I'm like, well, we got. You can feel it when you're playing. You can feel we've been getting lucky.
I don't think
with
you're
that
winning
die.
this if you're playing it properly. I don't think you're winning this game
Unless you get a little bit lucky.
unless you play well and have some luck. It's not so bad as I think.
Well, that's a great point.
yeah.
That really is a great point and a great way to say it. Which is that even if I'm complaining about the luck, as long as you're not going to win unless you play well, it's good. It's good enough. It's good, and that is the case here. If you don't play well, you are going to lose, regardless of the luck. Okay, we've been going for an hour and a half. We should sort of bring this home, but let's talk about the expansions a little bit. Starting with Arima's Light, that's the first expansion. What does that bring?
So you get some new tiles, which you swap out from the base game.
They're just
Okay.
different kinds of traps that work differently. Exploding one and snakes one, they work differently. You have to strategize
The
differently.
exploding one is fantastic
The
because there's a
exploding one is
push your luck
cool.
there, because once it loses its 3, it has essentially kind of a timer, and when it loses those 3 things, it explodes and pretty much kills anybody on any of those surrounding tiles. but then through the game it explodes. So sometimes if you have a choice where to put the enemies, you can put them near, and they'll get killed from that as well, which is really kind of cool. But it's really like, do we push and run through there? Usually it's let's put the dog.
It's
on
that same flavor of the rubble collapsing, but sort of ramped up, because you can see it ticking down. You can see the odds of it going off, getting larger, and then so you can plan around it and push your luck around it.
The snake tile isn't that big of a deal, like, because it just starts with snakes and it's going to do damage, but it does make you think like, I'm going to run through this and I don't want to come back through it.
That's right.
Right, because it's going to always
it does
be racking
change.
up.
We didn't have that much interaction with the snakes, but yeah, you're like, don't want to go there. The snakes are there. You don't want the snakes.
Yeah, and then the last thing is there's like a really one of the coolest traps, which is like a rubble trap that's a trap. It's not just like a cave in, because if you go onto it and you trigger the trap, it has this cool thing, like, it's like you hear it, like you see the dust come down, and you're like, uh-oh.
Oh yeah, it's about to go off.
And then the next time you do it, it crashes. And that's really cool, because you're like, I don't want to sit on this tile, but it's just, it's very thematic, super cool.
Okay, and 5 new characters. The characters that we sort of mentioned all in one, but 5 of those are in the expansion: the strongman, the dog and his beastmaster, and then a couple others.
Yeah, and the
the Terra one. The Terra woman is in Arama's Light.
If you can't win this game, use that fortune teller, because she will win you the game. But the coolest thing is something that completely turns the game on the head, which is it's just the arc, and
that's not the coolest thing. That arc was not that good.
I just like the idea that
it was fun.
It's crazy that
it's very clever,
but it's a completely, instead of building a path back, you're pushing this arc through, and you just have to it's like the
push it and pull it.
Yeah, and you have to get it to the end, to where the where you would normally pick up the relic, and you push it into the fire and you win. But you don't have to come back, but it takes a whole lot more to push this thing through, and it can take damage.
It takes damage like a character. The enemies attack it. It's very clever, but for me, it breaks a huge strategic element of the original game, which is that you have to get back. And the clock doesn't double. You don't get to the end, and the volcano doesn't come and increases the pace.
But the second the volcano comes, you lose instantly.
I know.
So there's that's where the timing comes in.
It's a different puzzle, but it's missing 2 key elements that make the base game so good: the clock speed ramping up and rush to get out, and the need to plan a route that's efficient coming back. So
to me, I think I wouldn't want to play that way the majority of the time, but as a kind
fun.
of mix it up.
It's fun to mix it up.
I think it's awesome.
Sure.
I thought it was super
it's
fun.
very cool too. It does change how you do it.
And I love the little mini fort and stuff. The little wooden meeple of the arc is really cool. To me, it's just different enough to mix the game up a little bit.
Sure, it's interesting, and 5 new characters. I mean, I guess for us this would be a must buy, right? I mean, if you love the game anywhere close to how much we do,
you absolutely don't need it. Subterra 2 is amazing.
Sure, you can play
adding
it.
in,
but if you love Subterra 2, you're gonna love having the new characters.
Play a bunch, and then get a little infusion of new stuff.
The tiles add a little bit, but those 5 characters alone.
I think they add a lot to me. I think it just because that board gets boring sometimes. You want some new tiles.
Okay, the next...
But exponentially, you can play the old set of tiles with the arc. You can play the new set of tiles with the arc.
You can mix it up.
So you can kind of do a little... It gives you more variables.
And you can mix and match all the characters. They're not restricted.
Typhoon
Wakes is the next expansion, which clearly for us is the lesser of the expansion. So what does it add?
So it adds...
Bring it out. Let me see the back.
So it adds it's kind of like the Black Stories of
Black Trader,
Black Secret, Black Secret of Ghost Stories, which was the worst expansion for Ghost Stories, because I mean, essentially, it's this great puzzle you're working on that's very difficult, and it's what if somebody
purely cooperative?
Somebody was controlling this. There's so many better games that are just I don't know why they feel the need to do this. And Pandemic did it too with the bioterrorists.
That's right.
Never play that.
We don't want it. No. We don't want it. But so there's a whole thing we haven't played, we haven't tried. It's a whole board, and one player controls the temple.
And you only get 2 new characters with this. One of which looks very exciting, but wasn't very good.
Yeah, so only 2 new characters, but you do get the key thing here for the cooperative players is different kinds of enemies.
Yeah, I think they call it the Legion scenario. Something like that.
So you've got ranged shooters who are slower but can shoot from afar. Cool, You've got exploding ones that run super fast, but they explode when they hit you. And then you've got this eternal guy who wakes up when you pick up the artifact and is basically
He's like-
unstoppable.
I visualize the Destroyer and Thor or whatever the big. But yeah, it's kind of it's just a little bit more variety, you know. And then you can take that and you can mix it with the old tiles or with the new tiles or with the arc. And that was pretty challenging because it's kind of neat because then it would force you to be like, should we take 2 fighting characters, or you can be like we did, take none and lose,
get your ass kicked.
Yeah,
Yeah, those enemies do really sort of require re-strategizing how you're going to deal with
which
them.
is exactly what an expansion should do.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely well worth buying, but I mean, like, it's nowhere near as useful as the
buy
Army
it. Buy
Mist
it. You're probably, if you're watching this 2 hours in, you're the completionist. You're going to go buy all of this. We can't stop you, whatever. But you should buy Arama's Light first, and then this if you really
So
need it.
that brings us to
Oh, does it? Okay, yeah.
the original Subterra. Now we should point out that we played the Subterra 2 first, then the expansions, and then we played Subterra. What do you think, Jesse?
Don't like it.
Why would you do this? When it's like,
Well,
it's
yeah.
like,
Now that there's 2, you would
Never,
you should
ever.
never play
Well,
that.
it's interesting though because like we were talking about this and there's no way to know. Like, would you ever? Like, if we had played this, would we have liked it?
Yeah, it's
Would
a
we
really
have-
good question.
would
We
have
didn't
gone to the
really
second
enjoy it. But
Well, it was
those
fine,
are
but-
great questions.
But it's so funny because you see the areas that this game is lacking are completely changed and updated and
They're all
fixed.
They're all
in the next-
improved. They're all streamlined, made more elegant. All the things that worked were ramped up. And it's interesting. You can see it, like, first of all, exploring. You're making tiles in any configuration as far out as you want. It doesn't feel that restrictive. It doesn't feel that big a deal where you put them. And then the iteration to this Subterra 2 makes it much tighter puzzle.
Iconography is much muddier. It's
Yeah.
harder to see. You gotta look a lot.
Yeah.
Healing is for 2, so like this pushing is like the way you push is a little different.
That was one of my least favorites part about this. So you can it's so if you're interested in game design, comparing these 2 games is fascinating. It would be great to hear from Tim Pinder, the designer, some of the thoughts that went on. But so they both have the same basic mechanics. You got 2 actions you can exert. In the original though, you exert, and how does exertion work? You explain it.
You just do it. You just exert. And you only
get the extra action.
If you roll, and it's kind of cool. It's the stumble die. If you roll the stumble, it's like you were moving extra fast and you stumble and you hurt yourself and you lose a heart. But otherwise, there's no penalty.
That's right.
And so like, but it takes a lot more to heal you in this game.
That's true.
So like, most of the time you feel like you could push the whole game and get way more actions.
And you
but
probably should be
never-
pushing a lot. And the iteration to Subterra 2 where you always lose 1 heart,
but you
and then if you get unlucky, you lose 2. So it's a push your luck element, but there's a cost to it. And the fact that there's no cost to it most of the time, and there's some abilities that like increase the die roll, so that person is like always exerting it. It doesn't make it an interesting choice anymore.
But you could see like a lot of times in like living card games and stuff, you'll see like a character or a card or something, and they'll be like, well, this is what it was going to do, but then we realized it was broken or less interesting.
yeah.
Change it. And like the fact is that this was a turning of knobs, right? Because it was like it's 2 actions to heal a single point, but you can exert versus you always exert. But you always spend a heart, but you could lose a second heart, but it only costs you 1 to... So it's just a weird little...
Yeah, and I think
non-dial
when we
type
played Subterra, the first one, the original one, I think a lot of our feeling was like, okay, we can see the strategy, the optimization, but everything is a little less fun. Like, they've all of the puzzly parts are still in Subterra 2, but they're all more enjoyable. Like, healing is more fun, and a huge difference is the combat.
That's...
So
I think
let's talk about
there's
that.
3 main areas, and I'm going to go through number 1. When you're dead, you can be revived, but nobody's ever going to revive you because of the point that Jesse's going to bring up.
First of all, you don't get to move at all when you
You're
die.
stuck.
Your turn's over for the rest
Right.
of the game.
Probably, yeah.
You can't.
Number 2.
That's such a clever decision, though, to change that to letting you move in the
Because
new
it's
one.
not much, but it's something.
Yeah, but you're still in it. Yeah. Okay.
then
So
the
that's the
second
first
thing is, like,
okay.
some
And
of
the
action-
exertion
some of
and the healing is so expensive.
which is fine because it just makes you be much more careful. But the thing is, like, there's some tiles that you have to like throw a rope up to, to be able to pass, and it takes your entire turn, and not only that, but you roll a die to see if you succeed.
That's right.
So you can just stand there for 3 or 4
lot
turns
more-
and never get up
That's
that
right.
thing.
A lot more rolling and maybe nothing happens.
Yes.
Rolling, maybe nothing happens.
And then,
maybe my turns up.
So, but the biggest difference, which I think is really cool. You're less hot on it, but let's hear it.
It's that the monsters in Subterra, you can't fight them. They're just, when they walk onto your space, they kill you instantly kill you, and there's no getting rid of them.
Well, one character can kill them, but if you get far enough away from them, then they just disappear, which is tough to do. But it's such a cool thing of like, it's like they're looking for you, and like whatever, they're gone.
Thematically, it's cool. Like they're these awesome, really scary things.
But it's thematic and terrifying. You're like, oh my god, if there's if a monster comes up here, we're dead. That's right. But you can't, like, we only played it a few times, but like we had a game where like
that happened though. The monster was like, all right,
they came out right away, and there was no getting around them.
No.
And we tried. We probably should have scooped that game right in the beginning.
Yeah, we probably should.
But like it was basically impossible. So we tried to branch out and like in 4 different ways. And
more people came out.
Each of the ways ended in a dead end, meaning we had to go back.
Cool. It's thematically cool, but boy, imagine you're playing a 4-player game, and early on, one of the players is like, it's basically player elimination, because that person can never wake up. No one can get in to save them, and the difference though, if you watch the iteration in Subterra 2, like fighting those guys is not a major, like they're easy to kill one of them, but then when there's 2 or 3, you're facing a horror situation, and they still feel oppressive. But the fact that everyone can try to fight them a little,
some people are better,
some are better, and some shouldn't be fighting them. Yeah, but to me, like, whatever thematic excitement you get out of this horror thing that you can never kill is way offset by how it messes with the enjoyment of playing the game.
If Subterra 2 had another little expansion where there was an unkillable, like, monster that came along.
Well, don't forget the Eternal guy. Sure, you could put him to sleep a little.
Right, but like if there was some monster that killed you immediately and then like kept moving, that would be exciting just to try a variation.
I agree.
So all in all, like having gone the reverse way, like it's like, why would anybody ever, want to? I'm trying to think of like some analogy of like, why would you've got chocolate ice cream? Why would you eat like, whatever? I don't have a good analogy, but don't ever play this.
Now you should.
Bad to say, but there are expansions for it which we haven't played. But like, why would we ever play that one?
Yeah, but it's good advice. Like if you love Subterra 2, probably you don't want to buy Subterra. Get on the message boards and ask for expansions for Subterra 2, because we'd play all of them, right? You keep making these, make more characters, we'll play them. Yeah. All right, shall we give our final thoughts?
Final rating time.
You want to rate it first? You brought this game to us. Why don't you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Summing up, so much strategic decisions, so much teamwork, like some luck, but very little comparatively. A lot of different characters leading to a lot of different variety. Very easy to get to the table. Very easy to learn. Gorgeous looking, highly thematic. What more do you want? 10.
That's a 10 for you.
In fact, it's going to go on my top 10 if we ever redo our top 10s.
Well, you've hit some of the bullet points. I love the cooperation. I love the long-term, short-term planning. For me, that's like dear to my heart. The thematics, normally I don't care so much, but I love the pacing and the arc and the tense feeling. Really does feel like a real-time game to me. And love the combinations of playing different roles, makes the game feel like a whole different puzzle. To me, though, the real secret ingredient here, the real secret ingredient that puts this game in that top echelon and makes it feel in a way like sort of pandemic, that pandemic secret ingredient is lots of little push your luck elements with statistics, probabilities you can wrap your head around. Like, the odds of this area crashing is like 1 in 10, 1 in 5.
Well, you all bet those on your money.
And everything works that way. Like every enemy, you're like, okay, 1, we can handle it. We're probably safe. We're probably not going to bring out another one. I'm probably not going to reveal another enemy tile here. You can balance all those things, but when they all add up, you're like, every little thing you have to replan around. And every time a tile comes out, it's happening slowly enough that you can build new plans. And maybe we'll record a playthrough of this if people want to see it. But you watch us play this. Someone commented on one of our videos, you guys are too serious. You don't look like you're having fun. When we play this game, we've played a bunch of these, almost a dozen. We spend a lot of downtime saying, stop for a second. Let's think about this. Let's think about what to do. And for me, that's the most enjoyable thing. And to find someone to play these games with that you enjoys chewing on that.
I forgot the whole thing, which is, this is the plan I think we should do. And then somebody says, okay, let me pitch you a completely different plan. And then you settle on some kind of amalgamation of the two, which I think is like, that's really the sign of a good game.
Fun. So for me, also a 10. Although I can see playing through all the characters and being like the game is getting a bit samey in a way that Pandemic doesn't for some reason. It is the same temple, the same tiles. I could see it getting samey, but boy, if you put out a new expansion every year, I would keep playing this till the end of time.
Yeah. And don't forget that amazing moment, which I got to witness, of, Jesse, I don't think you should stand on that tile. And you said, what are the odds? And then rock but killed your character. I was like, that's the best.
Yeah, but the first game, you were like, don't go anywhere near those locations. And then by the time we get 6 games, Greg was like, all his people were hanging out on that rock.
Which did burn us because
one did fall down and kill us.
3 characters
was
crushed and one rock fall. Yeah.
All right, well, let us know if you play this game and like it as much as we do. Big recommendations from both of us.
I think we'll do a quick before you buy of each of these. We really breeze through the expansions, so you could watch those if you want to get a little closer look at some of the mechanisms in those games, I think. But otherwise, you probably didn't need this much, let alone anymore.
And let us know if in this hour and a half there's something we missed that you think we should have mentioned. And we'll see you next time. You can put this, although this can't be seen.
Needs to have its
This is just like right in the trash.
Right in the so is this like... God, it's so hot in here. Dude, that was
not
running the
that
whole
hot,
time.
boy. Wait till you have no idea how hot it gets in here.
Well, if I were you, I wouldn't be wearing pants. My boots would be off. I'd be like,
well, I wear shorts when I normally do it. Okay. Today on Caught for Two, a spoiler. Nope. Nope.
Oh my goodness.
Nope.
First take.
Nope.
I can't believe I just said, oh my goodness. Oh my word.